This video will show you how to replace the water pump on this Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 liter engine. This will be located along the passenger side of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now we're going to have to remove the alternator, so first we need to disconnect our negative battery terminal. Now on this battery in particular, somebody's already replaced the terminal end. Typically you would just use a 10mm to loosen this mounting bolt enough that you can pull that up and away from the battery. I'm going to disconnect the negative wire from the terminal end in this case. On my application, an 11mm. Just go ahead and slide that out of place. Set it aside so it's making no contact with your battery. Now we've disconnected the battery, we're going to be paying attention to our radiator. Starting with the radiator cap, make sure it's cool to the touch. You never want to open your cooling system if it's hot. We're pressing down, turning counterclockwise, and I always lift up and away from my face. A quick inspection of the seal, confirming this is still in good usable order, and we can set that aside. Now we're going to make our way all the way over towards the driver's side of the radiator. If you make your way to the lower corner, you're going to find the drain. Make sure you have a collection receptacle under this area. I like to use a small rubber hose on my drain tube. That's going to divert the coolant down into my coolant receptacle. Of course, we'll collect and recycle as we need. There's going to be a small turnable drain plug for this. You just want to take hold of it. You're going to turn it counterclockwise and drain the coolant from in the system. You don't need to fully remove this. You just want to continue turning counterclockwise until you hear fluid making its way out. While we have the coolant draining, let's continue on. We're going to remove the upper engine cover. That's very simple. Just tug it straight up and away. Now we're focusing on the alternator. Before we start dislodging the alternator, I like to start with the electrical wiring harnesses. For the first one, we're going to be using a small angled pick. You can also use a flat blade screwdriver if necessary, but essentially we just want to pop this cover out of place. That exposes a 10mm mounting nut. We can remove that. Remove the wiring harness from the alternator. Now just below that, you're going to find another electrical connector. This one's a little different. You don't need any tools. It does have a locking tab. Now that exposes our next electrical connector. For this one, you don't need any tools, but it does have a locking tab. We're going to squeeze that in and pull it out of place. A quick inspection for corrosion, we'll set that aside. Now we still have to disconnect this wiring harness. There's a 10mm bolt holding this in place. There we go. There's that mounting bolt. Now we can set that wiring harness aside. Now something to think about during the removal and installation of your alternator is that your belt system doesn't have an automatic tensioner. The tensioner for your belt system is right up along this area, just above the alternator. So with that said, we want to feel that serpentine belt. You should be able to feel that it has some flexibility, a little bit of movement up and down. You may even be able to twist it slightly. The belt itself should never be so tight that you can't move it at all, or if you were to flick at it like this, it sounds like you're strumming a guitar. Other than that, you don't want to be able to take the belt and move it up and down like that. That would be too loose. So we'll just take quick note of the adjustment here, and now we're going to start with the mounting hardware. We're not starting here, but let's make our way down along the bottom of this area. Now for the lower hardware, this is essentially a pivot bolt. We're going to loosen it, but leave it in there a couple threads. I'm using a 14mm. I'm going to switch to a ratcheting wrench. Now that we have that bolt loosened, let's make our way up to the top. Now what we want to do is just below the adjuster, we have a 12mm bolt that leads into the alternator through the adjuster. Let's start removing that. Now that we have that bolt loose, I'm going to make my way up to the adjustment bolt. I've used some penetrant in this area. I'm going to start loosening this next. We can see that alternator moving, and it's releasing tension from our serpentine belt. Let's fully remove our upper bolt. Now we can remove the entire adjuster apparatus. You can follow it over towards the engine. You're going to find a 12mm mounting bolt holding this on. Now the next thing you're going to want to do with this is make sure you clean the threaded area and confirm that it does move as it should. You should be able to turn this bolt one direction or the other. That's how the adjustment for the alternator will be made. Now we can remove the belt from our alternator. Just go ahead and slide that to the side. Along the bottom of the alternator, we have that bolt that we had started to remove. We can fully remove that and remove the alternator from the vehicle. Now we can rock the alternator around, but typically it's going to be stuck in the downward position by a small bushing. For this, I'm going to gently start prying it up and away from its mounting bracket. We don't need to go very far, we just need to break it free. A quick inspection of your alternator and set it aside. There's the bushing I was mentioning right there. It's a good idea to fully remove the serpentine belt at this point. Once you have it out of position, just give it a quick inspection. We want to confirm it's not dry rotted or cracked in any way. This looks fine, so we'll set it aside. It's time to close the drain plug on the radiator. We'll make our way all the way down, turn that clockwise until it stops. Double check to make sure that's secured and clean up any mess in this area. Now we're going to move our collection receptacle underneath the area where the water pump's located. There could still be coolant inside of this area. To remove the water pump, we're going to be using a 12mm for each one of the mounting bolts. You can see several of them from along the top and along the side. One of them is going to be located just on the bottom of that water pump. You can see it underneath the pulley. The lower bolt is going to be the hardest one to gain access to, so that's where I'm going to start. There's our first mounting bolt. Now we only have 4 more mounting bolts to deal with. I'm going for the one along the back side here. As you can tell, that mounting bolt is considerably longer than the first. Take note of where each one of the mounting bolts goes for the installation process. Let's go for this one right here. That's another short bolt. Now for my next bolt, I'm going to start loosening this, but I like to leave it in a couple threads. I'll fully remove the last bolt, we'll break the water pump free, remove any coolant from in this area, and then we can remove that water pump. Okay. Now, I've seen it before, the water pump will be stuck in place. Other times it does break free like ours has. I'm just going to press this in. We'll fully remove that final mounting bolt that we left in loose. There's that bolt. And remove the water pump. There it is, friend. Once you have the water pump out of position, we're going to remove our seal. Just use an angled pick if necessary. You should be able to pull that out of place. We never reuse any of these seals. You don't want to have a leak. We'll set that aside for disposal. Continuing on, we want to make sure we clean the entire mating surface. You don't want any raised areas, which will cause a coolant leak. I'm just using a clean rag. I don't like to try to use any type of detergent which might make its way into the cooling system. Going to try to make our way all the way around this. Take your time. It needs to be clean. We have everything cleaned. Now we can put on our brand new gasket. As far as the gasket, you just want to make sure you have it in the proper orientation so it aligns with the groove on the engine. As we bring this in, I'm lightly pressing it in. We want to make sure that it's seated inside of the groove all the way around. You can give it a light stretch if necessary. Now have a look down at the bottom of this. You can tell that I did press it in, but it came back out. If I was to install the water pump and the gasket's not properly seated, you're going to have a coolant leak. We don't want that. Double check your work and continue on. Prior to installation of the brand new water pump, let's pay attention to our bolts. During the removal process, you found that we have 3 short bolts and 2 longer bolts. The longer bolts go into a coolant jacket, so we need to have thread sealant at least halfway up the threads. Do that to each of your 2 longer bolts. Now we can install our brand new water pump. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. As we start sliding this down, we're going to start in the mounting hardware. Once all pieces of mounting hardware are started into their proper locations, we'll lightly bottom them out. There is 2 different torque specifications we're going to have to deal with for the installation process. All right, there's 2 of them. Another small bolt down here. The last small bolt will be down along the bottom. Now it's time for our last long mounting bolt. This is going on the back side. They're all started in. Let's lightly bottom them out. Now the torque for the 2 longer bolts is going to be 19 foot-pounds. The other 3 shorter bolts, 15 foot-pounds. We'll start with the 2 longer bolts, 19 foot-pounds. On to the next 3 shorter mounting bolts, 15 foot-pounds. For good measure, it's a good idea to go around one more time. Once again, we just don't want to have a coolant leak in this area. We have everything torqued. Now we're going to clean and just double check this area. Let's get the alternator in place. During the removal process, I had mentioned that it may get stuck on a bushing. This bushing actually gets pulled in when you tighten the bolt up against the engine bracket, so we're going to want to lightly start tapping this out and away. We don't want to remove it, we just want to have it close to flush here, so we can slide this into place. Just a couple light taps on that. Now we can see down along the bottom. We'll align that area that we have the bushing over the bracket. Now once you have that rested in place, we can make adjustments as necessary, but let's start installing the lower mounting bolt. Just start it in, but leave it loose. We've cleaned the threads on this. Now you can start bringing this close to the snug position, but like I mentioned, just leave it loose so we can make our adjustments. Now it's time for the adjuster with its mounting bracket. We'll start getting this into place. We have our mounting bolt. Go ahead and start that in as well. Now it's time for the upper bolt for the alternator. Now this is actually going to have to make its way through the adjuster port here. It's going to go through the slot on the adjuster bracket, but it has to align with the alternator, so we can make our adjustment to that angle of the alternator as necessary. We'll get this aligned and started in. Now it's time to install the serpentine belt. The serpentine belt's going to go over the alternator pulley, and the backing's going to go along that water pump pulley. You can tell that that's a smooth surface. As the belt makes its way around the water pump pulley, we're going to bring it down towards the AC compressor. It's going to go around that AC compressor pulley and then all the way around the crank pulley as well, all the way back up to that alternator. For this, I'm going to start down at that crank pulley. Bring it over the teeth. It's going to go all the way underneath that AC compressor. As we're dealing with any of the ribbed pulleys, you want to make sure the belt's seated properly. Now coming from along the back side, we're going to bring it up and over the alternator, and then we're ending with the smooth pulley of the water pump. See if we can get this to stay on there. Slide it on. Now that I have this rested in place, a quick inspection. Look at that crank pulley all the way down on the bottom on the rearward side there. The belt's not seated properly. That can cause damage to the belt or other issues, so of course we're going to make sure that that's properly in place. Double check each and every pulley and we'll continue on up along the top adjustment point. Now we can start making our adjustment for the alternator and the belt itself. Now what's going to happen is as we start tightening our adjustment bolt, it'll start pulling the alternator away from the engine, which is going to apply tension to that belt. As I mentioned during the removal process, we don't want to have the belt over-tightened or under-tightened. Let's make sure that we have this adjusted properly. Let's have a look at that belt. Now that belt's entirely too loose. Continue your adjustment. I'm starting to feel a little tension on this bolt. That's a good sign. Let's check the belt. Feels a little too loose for me. I like it just a little bit tighter. Keep in mind, if you over-tighten this, you can cause issues to the bearings on any one of the pulleys. We can move the belt around, but it's not loose to the point that it's going to chatter or not grip onto the pulleys properly. Once you feel as though you do have the proper adjustment, let's make sure that we tighten our upper hardware first. For each of these bolts, we're going to snug them, and I'm going to torque them to 18 foot-pounds. The upper hardware is torqued. It's time for the pivot bolt. For this, snug it up and we're going to torque it to 42 foot-pounds. Let's get our torque wrench on there. The alternator is fully torqued in place. Let's just double check the tension of our belt and the orientation. The routing looks good here. Let's continue on. Let's pay attention to our electrical wiring harnesses. We've already confirmed that our electrical connector is in good condition, but we need to make sure we clean and inspect the power wire. I'm using some fine sandpaper. We'll clean this up. Just double check both sides here. We want to have a good contact point. Now that we have that clean, let's get this electrical wiring harness over towards where it's going to be in position. We'll line this up and install our 10mm bolt. For that, just go ahead and start it in and snug it up. Right there is bottomed out. Obviously, we don't want to break the bolt, but we do want to make sure this is secured. With that in place, let's continue on to our electrical connector. The locking tab's going to face towards the center of the engine or towards our plastic intake. Go ahead and line that up, press it on, listen for a click from that. After an audible click, a light tug confirming it's secured. It's time for the power wire. Go ahead and slide it over the stud on the alternator. We'll press it until it's flush. 10mm mounting nut. Start it on, snug that up. The torque for this is going to be 87 inch-pounds. It's not very much. Let's make sure we protect that wire with our plastic cover. Now this cover may still be on your electrical wiring harness, or if it fell off, that's okay. You can just slide it right into place and lock it down. Now it's time to fill the cooling system. That's going to be done through the top of the radiator. There's several different ways of doing this. A lot of times people are going to have a coolant funnel. You'd want to install your adapter, install the funnel, and then you'd want to continue on topping off the coolant approximately halfway up the funnel. As air makes its way out of the system, coolant's going to go down, so you want to continue this process, making sure that you top off the funnel as needed. Otherwise, you might have a specialty tool. A specialty tool like this is going to work by applying vacuum inside of the cooling system. This is going to be a great way to test for leaks prior to installing any coolant. Since I have this tool, I'm going to be using this. Now with this tool, what we were watching is the gauge here. We had the needle make its way from the red through the yellow and into the green. We want to make sure that it goes past that 25 mark, pretty much anywhere past that's good. At that point, I've closed off the system, removed air, and now we're just paying attention to the gauge to confirm that the needle does not drop. It's okay if it stays in the green, but if for some reason it drops into the yellow, or worse, the red, that means you have a serious leak and it needs to be taken care of before you continue any further. As you can tell, this is holding perfectly. Now I'm using the manufacturer's specified coolant. If for some reason you're using a concentrate, you want to make sure that you have that diluted 50-50 with distilled water. Now let's start filling the cooling system. This is going to work with the vacuum that we've created in the system. Let's open this up. Obviously we want to make sure that our coolant receptacle does not run empty and we don't draw any air into the system. Before that jug runs out, I'm just going to swap it out with a new one here. Now we can remove our tool. Now I finished filling the cooling system with my apparatus, but if you're using a funnel, of course we would want to have it topped off, and we're going to leave fluid inside of that funnel. You're going to want to start up the vehicle and let it run until it gets up to normal operating temperature. You can tell when that happens because the cooling fans are going to turn on. Inside of the passenger compartment, we want to make sure we have the climate control on the hot setting. That'll ensure that the thermostat in the engine opens up and the coolant will be allowed to circulate. Once that circulates, it's going to remove any air from in the system and go ahead and draw that coolant down. With the tool I used, you should not have to do that. I'm sure that the coolant's full like it needs to be, so I'm going to reinstall my cap. Line it up, press it on, turn it clockwise until it's completely bottomed out. Once your cooling system's full, it's always a good idea to check the coolant reservoir. You can go ahead and remove and replace that fluid as necessary. Make sure you top it off up to the maximum line. Let's take that engine cover, we'll rest it in place and press it down. Double check, make sure it's secure. Back over at the battery, it's time to reconnect the negative terminal. On my application, I'm using an 11mm mounting bolt here. Go ahead and start that in and snug it up. Double check to make sure it's completely secured in place. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our vehicle's water pump. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and clean any mess, take the vehicle for a road test, and of course you're going to double check for leaks. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.